Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Next Level Leap Show. And I want to introduce you to a dear friend of mine who is the yin to my yang, yang to my yang. Her name is Veronica Romney, and she is a dream team architect. So thanks for being here, Veronica. It's super exciting that we are having one of our many conversations, but just in front of lots of people.
We do talk a lot. We box pretty much every week. So this will be fun to have people get a preview of our friendship.
Yeah, it'll be super fun. And so, just to give people a sense of your background and where you came from, catch us up to today in just a few minutes, like where you started and how you end up in entrepreneurship and what you're doing today. And then we'll get into the meat of what I really want to talk about.
Sure. Well, I have this theory that entrepreneurs birth other entrepreneurs. So my parents are entrepreneurs. That's where that story really starts from, as Cuban immigrants starting a company from scratch. But I've been in marketing for 15 years. I studied, graduated, have a degree in marketing, and then worked my way up through the corporate experience until I left probably October 2017. The call of the wild called me. I couldn't deny it anymore. I also had my first son. So, it was time to just center my life around my family as opposed to my career. And then, talk about the last couple of years. I was a speaker and trainer for Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. I worked for Pete Vargas for a hot second. I was the chief of staff at Boss Babe. I've worked with a number of big brands, just like you have, kind of behind the scenes, helping them scale their businesses, structure their teams. And here I am. I'm a dream team architect because a former employee of mine called me that. And I'm just clever enough to go to GoDaddy and see that it was available.
It's always about what domain name is still available, right?
Yeah.
And that's amazing. It was meant to be yours.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of what you do is behind the scenes. You're working with 7 and 8 figure businesses,
Mhm.
helping them with their team,
Mhm.
fractional chief of staff, ensuring that everybody is in the right butts in the right seats, all moving in the same direction. One of the things that you talk about is having happy ears
Oh,
when it comes to hearing what it is that you want to hear versus what like a candidate actually has to offer. And I know a lot of people are hiring right now. I'm hiring, everybody's hiring because we're in such a place of transition in
mhm.
our businesses and
Mhm.
really in the world, right?
Mhm.
But what are some of the big mistakes that people make when they're thinking about hiring and onboarding a new team member?
Yeah, so I say this a lot. Basically, like for example, let's say you and I have a conversation and you're coming to me and you're like, I think I need this, or I think I need this, or I really want to achieve this objective this year before the closeout of the year. Do I get like a project manager? Do I get a rainmaker? Do I get a DLO? Like where you and I are kind of going back and forth. And then
Yeah.
based off the variables and the factors, I'm like, okay, you just need an executive assistant. We don't actually need to spend a ton of money on some high paying leader. Like really what you need, Laura, is somebody to like help you with you and like protect you and your schedule. Right. So then you're like, okay, I have clarity. I'm getting an executive assistant. I go forth, I start my interview process. And then I come across these candidates who have more knives in their Swiss Army knife, so to
Yeah.
speak. And then the happy ears turn on where you're like, oh, and this is very typical. I'm not saying this in any kind of disrespectful way. This is super common with visionary CEOs who are true visionaries. Because if you think of a visionary personality, we see things that others don't see. We see the Walt Disney World before it even like breaks ground. So when a candidate starts telling us about all the things they can do, all of a sudden
Yeah.
our happy ears, our visionary appetite starts to get perked up. And then all of a sudden we start to imagine what they can become beyond the thing that we actually need for the next 3 to 6 months. And then on the negative side, that ends up turning somebody who would just be perfect in the thing that we needed at the moment into this kind of hodgepodge Frankenstein role that they're a little bit of this and they're a little bit of that and they're a little bit of this because they have all of these attributes. And then we inadvertently put them in a position to fail because they're not set up for success.
Okay, that's so good. What are some of the mistakes that you see people making most often when it comes to growing their teams, making sure people are in the right roles? Because I think for so many of us visionary types
Mhm.
that we want to see the best, we see the best in everybody, right? And we
Mhm.
want to be to believe that anybody is capable of anything and more. It's part of what makes us entrepreneurs. But what
Mhm.
are some of the downfalls of that approach when it comes to structuring your team?
Well, I think you and I in particular work in an online centric industry, very personality driven businesses, face forward organizations. And there is a lot of emulating and modeling that happens. So I'll be talking to one prospective client or a visionary CEO inside of my program. And they'll be like, well, so-and-so does it this way. Or I just very recently heard on a podcast that so-and-so had just hired their own chief of staff. So in the absence of confidence behind your choices, sometimes we want to emulate what we think others are doing to get to their success, but we're not actually behind the scenes.
Right.
So we start to try to build a business in the way that we think our peers or the ones that we aspire to become have built their companies. And then what happens more often than not is we just bloat our payroll and our P&L, and there goes our net profitability. And then we burn through cash, then we get frustrated. So that's one thing that I see a lot where I get on phone calls, especially when I've worked with the brands that I've worked for. Maybe that's been your experience. We're like, oh, I saw that you worked for Jennifer Allwood. I saw that you worked for Boss Babe. I want to do it how Boss Babe did it. I'm like, well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
That's a different arena. That's a different animal. And that might not be what you need to do right now. So there's that. I think the other thing that we're seeing a lot of is the entrepreneurial space is like the wild, wild west. It doesn't 100%, actually 100, it really doesn't translate to the corporate arena at all. Or even books like, there's just a lot of organizational books out there that I love and adore, but it doesn't mean that they always translate to our arena and our space. And so I do see a lot of people promoting way too fast and giving people really, really high level, titles, chief this, VP this, director of this, when the actual candidate themselves doesn't have the experience or the skills to actually, be deserving of that title yet in their career. And then we put people in a position that they get unhappy because they think they're not getting the salary or the position, the title that they've been granted. So I'm seeing a lot of that for our clients as well.
Okay, that's so good. You have really funny reels. And there was one in particular recently where I think I posted beneath it where I was like, I feel called out.
Oh.
And it was the Frankenstein position one. And it was the catch-all, right? And it's hard because I'm hiring right now like a somewhat catch-all position. It is like an operations coordinator / executive assistant, and they are kind of doing all of the behind the scenes admin / coordination, which is sort of, it feels Frankensteinish, but according to you, it's not as Frankensteinish as having somebody customer facing and behind the scenes, which you helped me kind of think through. Sure. But what are some of the other characteristics of the Frankensteins have you seen?
And I wasn't calling you out. You like voxed me immediately. You're like, is that about me? I'm like, no.
I feel seen.
No. I had recorded that before our conversation, ironically. But okay, so let's define Frankenstein role, what they mean, because there are really amazing candidates that are like little Swiss Army knives that they can do a ton of things. And then there's what I would deem a Frankenstein role, which is a guaranteed turnover position. So a Frankenstein role is where they're serving too many masters. So if you look at their job, and I can tell immediately, take 3 different colored highlighters, pull up the job description, highlight everything on the job description that's serving the prospect in one color, then take the same job description, another color, and highlight everything that's serving the member, the customer, the person who's already paid.
Oh my God.
And then take another color highlighter and highlight everything that serves just the company and the people inside the company. So a Frankenstein role is somebody who's serving too many masters. They're serving the prospect, and how you court a prospect, how you care for a prospect, how you convert a prospect is a different language, a different style of service than when you're caring and servicing your customers, right? Like it's different. Yes. But a Frankenstein role basically is that, like at any given day, they walk into their workday or they start their morning, like what's the most important task? Is it to do this task that serves the company, the prospect, or the customer? And it's confusing and it's hard to prioritize. And they just feel like they're a C- across the board.
Yeah.
A Swiss Army knife is a candidate who just serves one master, which is, let's say, just the prospect, just like a marketing manager, a marketing assistant. And they can do lots of things inside of a marketing channel. They can do Canva graphics. They can write some copy and deploy it in your email service provider. They can help you with your sales page. They can do some of the tech behind your funnel software. Like that's cool. That's totally fine. That's all within the lane of prospect-centric activity and ideally just one manager. That's not the same thing as a Frankenstein role.
Gosh. Okay. This is so good because I think what happens is, because I know because this happened to me, is that the company outgrows the role of the person.
All the
right?
time.
So maybe if you're small and you don't have a lot of clients, they can be customer facing
Sure.
and they can do some behind the scenes work.
Mhm.
Or let's say I'm
Mhm.
thinking about my membership, right? There's somebody who could potentially be a director of operations in two different companies, right? And full time and split their time.
Yep.
What are some signs that your company is outgrowing the person?
Well, actually, let's go back to how I think this happens more often than not. I think what happens, or what I see happens, is we find this really awesome human being. We love them. We think they're incredibly talented. We as visionaries see enormous potential because we start to vision cast for this person's future. And the needs of the company at multiple six figures is different than the needs of a company at seven figures, eight figures. Like just serving marketing is going to keep you 40 hours plus busy enough.
Yeah.
When you're just starting to scale, you have an incredible candidate, and some of the marketing things is only like 10 hours a week, and then some of the customer stuff is only another 10 hours a week, and then some of the, like my executive assistant company stuff, like that's only another like maybe 5-6 hours a week. So you're like, well, I want to ensure that I keep this person. I don't want to lose them, so I want to give them as many hours as I can, so I'll just spread the hours across the divisions of the company. That's honestly how it happens, probably more often than not.
Yes. So what do
Right.
you do? So if
I
someone's
don't do
listening.
it. So this is where having more of an operator personality, I'm both. I'm certainly a visionary integrator type, but I tend to be more of an integrator. I feel more comfortable being behind the scenes. It's actually taken me a lot to like own my own visionary capacity, but I have enough discipline to know that it's better to have somebody part-time than a multiple personality, multiple role, full-time individual. So I don't do that. I rather have somebody who's part-time in marketing, part-time in operations versus one person who's spread. And that has helped me retain my people for a really, really long time because they grow with the company as the company grows.
Yes, because they can expand their hours or expand their scope as the
Right.
company grows.
Right.
So, what are some other, is there anything else that you would say when it comes to helping people build a team
Mhm.
that complements that visionary personality? Like, how do you even know like how many people you would need in relation to like the company size?
Well, I don't go to the grocery store when I'm hungry. So same idea. I don't want to just hire because I'm in a place of insane burnout because you're not going to make the wisest choices. Let's be clear. I also don't ever bring somebody on board without checking with the money people ever. I just don't. So like I have a conversation once a month with my CFO. I advise my clients to do the same thing. And there is such thing as under and over leveraged. I remember being on a phone call with the CFO at Boss Babe, and we were too profitable. And it's like, we're under leveraged. We can have personnel to help us go faster. That's rare, but also it does actually happen. And then there's the situations where like, you're only 5% profitable, so we can't hire anybody.
Right.
So like let's actually let the stability and the profitability of the company dictate whether or not we invite people to our party. And then once you do that, what I normally start with when even working with my private clients is I usually have the visionary CEO themselves do their own shed list.
Mhm.
So I just kind of have them like, for lack of a better word, vomit everything that they do on behalf of their company. And you can very quickly see, especially when you take out your colored highlighters, where they're the most lopsided. They're either spending an enormous amount of time in the marketing department, which is very common. They'll spend some time maybe in the customer, and they're still the primary fulfillment mechanism of the company. They're the coach, they're the consultant. They're torn between getting more clients and servicing clients, or they're spending way too much time in the company. That's usually pretty rare.
Mhm.
So I can just tell when I'm working with my clients, we start with a shed list, we do the highlighting thing, and we're like, okay, you need the most help here because you're being bogged down the most here 1st.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
And then what are some of the success stories? Like we've talked about a lot of the problems that people
Sure.
have. What is life like on the other side of having a dream team?
Okay, so this just happened yesterday, and I really hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but I was on a Genie call. So Genie sessions are hour-long sessions I do with my Rainmaker residency members. And we just go really deep in one particular thing for an hour between them and their marketing leader. And I was on a call with Ashlyn Carter. If you know the Ashlyn Carter, Queen Ashlyn, she's lovely in all the ways. There was a really beautiful moment on the phone call where she got teary-eyed and she's like, for the first time ever, I really feel like my team has my back and
Mm.
really, really cares for my company like I do. And I just don't even want to get in their way or stand in the way or even have that be a thing. Cause I've never had this experience before. And she started getting emotional and I'm like, I'm getting emotional. Why are we both getting emotional? And that's happened. And that does happen where I will just have these calls and then the CEO is just like, I've never felt this level of support. I've never felt like somebody cared about my baby business the way that I care about my baby business.
What do you think? Is there anything in addition to what we've talked about today that creates that result? Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we touch on?
Oh, that's a good question. I think if I could say one thing, I think growing and scaling a company is extremely messy. And I think a lot of people, a lot of CEOs have a sense of um, hoarder shame. What I mean by that is like what we project and the persona that we have on social media and our email newsletters, like what we put out to the world, of course, is the version of ourselves we wish to be and the highlight reel. And then we think that only our company is this chaotic, that we think only our company is this messy behind the scenes. If somebody saw how I was running my company, I would just be like, I'd be mortified, I'd be dying. And I'm sure this, you can attest to this too. When you work with very, very big brands and you think that they have it all together to get to the place where they're multiple millions of dollars and millions of followers, nope. Everybody's got a hoarder's house. Everybody's got a messy junk drawer in the company, and it's totally normal. Where it's not normal is when we have burnout and turnout at insane rates with our staff. It's normal to not have your SOPs be completely clean and put together. It's normal not to have, like, it's normal to change your org chart more often than not because you're real rapidly growing. That's fine. Those aren't unhealthy attributes. But when I've seen you burn through 7 marketing leaders in 9 months, we have a problem.
Yeah. Yes. That is such good advice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you think, like just even using Ashlyn as an example, is there anything that you could think of that she did that allowed her to have that experience?
Yeah, and I can't speak too much for her because she's still very much in the process of doing it. But man, and I would say this for even some of my most favorite clients in the whole wide world, just that radical humility that she shares, that I know you share, that a lot of really, really great people and entrepreneurs, there's some really good people out there that are trying to do the right thing. And they're trying to do right by their audience, by their team, by themselves, by their family. And it's a big mantle. It's a heavy mantle to carry. But the humility that I see is shocking sometimes because I look at these people like, you're Ashlyn Carter, you're like queen. I think Laura Meyer, like, you're the queen. Adrienne Richardson, like, I could just name all the names. I'm like, oh my gosh, these are like the most epic human beings in the world. They're walking Beyoncé's in our industry. That's how I look at them. But then when you talk to them, they're like, oh no, like it's just, they won't even like own it.
Yeah.
And I know I feel that way too sometimes when people are like, oh, you're Veronica. I'm like, no, like, I know, because I'm also the one that comes home and my kids vomit on me when they're sick. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have those humility markers in your life where you're like, it's nothing. But that's the one thing that I will say is being radically humbled to invite people into your circle that can help you and not make you feel less than.
Yeah. And for me, it's always been, in building a team is not taking it personally.
Sure.
If they want to move on or if they don't like sure. Like it's not working for them anymore, even if they want something else. I think that's really hard because when you're a female leader, I think in particular, you have kind of a maternal, you have this sort of maternal approach with your team, right? And caretaking approach. And probably when I was younger, to an extreme that wasn't healthy. And now it's easier to let go. It's easier, not easy. And it's funny because you helped me through a situation I'll just share with everybody listening. A couple months ago where I had a key team member come to me and say, I don't know if I want to do the job I'm doing. And I was so afraid of losing her that was my immediate reaction. Right. And I think sometimes that can happen where we are so afraid of losing somebody that was really important to us, that we care about, that we love, that we think is critical to our operation. that we start hanging on a little bit tighter all of a sudden. And I've made that mistake before and it never works. Gripping on tighter never works out. And so you had advised me, that it's very difficult for somebody
Mhm.
to have a client facing and back end
Yep.
operational role. And so I went back to her and I was like, would you like this job more if it was only one of those two? And she's like, actually, I would.
Mm.
And she realized that the back end operations wasn't her love as much as client success. And I was like, well, great. This client success is actually really hard to train in. And so let's move you entirely over there, which will free up some time and capacity for you to do other things if
Mm.
you'd like. And then we'll just put everything back end operations on one person.
Mhm.
And that was an awesome outcome that wouldn't have worked if she also wasn't incredibly mature. She definitely brought a level of sincerity and authenticity to the table that this wouldn't have been possible if she didn't approach it that way.
Mhm.
But it was really for me, it was handling something differently than I would have in the past, which is
Mhm.
kind of like, no, don't go,
Mhm.
and having that immediate reaction that I think we all have as leaders, when somebody in our team makes our lives easier and we know it.
I have in just being a little bit vulnerable here, I feel like I can score myself or self-assess myself in a lot of different titles and roles in my life, but I've struggled in my parenting because my children, I have an oldest who's 8 years old, and man, he's a force. And I want to make sure that I do my part to channel him in the right way. And I'm scared that if I don't do that right in the proper way, that I like burn out his candle or he gets extremely rebellious or whatever. Anyways, I got a parenting coach. And one of the things that my parenting coach shared with me that I think is super relevant for even us as leaders and managers amongst our staff, she said, when we don't trust our kids, we try to control them and then we just call it help. And I was like, ooh, because I pride myself on not being a micromanager. However, when I feel the need or the want or the desire to quote unquote micromanage, it's usually because I just don't trust that something's getting done properly.
Mhm.
And so then I step in, or most of us will step in and we'll just call it help. But really you're controlling a situation because you don't trust it in somebody else's hands. Woo!
That's so good.
Right?
She makes an Instagram reel about it. The next week, it's not about you.
Deal.
It was just circumstance.
Yes. No, it was. The timing was, I love that you boxed me because this is the kind of dynamic that we have. You immediately went to me like, is this about me? I'm like, no, no.
But it was
That's
good. And the things you help with, I think, are the types of things that so many
Yeah.
entrepreneurs struggle with. I know team for me has been a 20-year
Yeah.
process. Like everything else always came natural. Like
Yeah.
marketing came natural, sales came natural. Building companies, building brands, looking for market opportunity, even fulfillment. It came natural to me. Team just
Mhm.
didn't. It
Mhm.
was sort of the last thing I really had to look at as a leader. And it's a constant evolution for me.
Mhm.
So that's why I love our friendship and love that you're here and you're sharing this.
Thank you.
And if anybody who's listening wants to connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
I am everywhere as myself. So you can just go to veronicaromney.com or on social media. It's V Romney.
All right. We're dropping the Iglesias.
Oh, yes, I'm Cuban. Hello. So it's Veronica Iglesias Romney, but on social media, it's just V Romney.
If you find her on Facebook, you get the Latin flair. All right. Well, thank you, Veronica, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Laura.